good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third lecture in the 2026 REL Distinguished Lecture Series presented by the Department of Religious Study at the University of West. My name is Miro Saki, Chair and Associate Professor in the department. So this event is a part of our University Common Ground Week celebration, and it's my honor to introduce our distinguished speaker, Venerable Dr. Bhikkhu Gyana Bodhi. He holds an MA and PhD in Buddhist Studies from University of Hong Kong and Mahidol University, and his scholarly work centers on Pali commentary literature and Theravada Buddhism. He has taught at several Buddhist institutions, including the International Buddhist College, Thailand, and the Buddhist Dharma Center of Hong Kong, and Vidyacharan Buddhist Research, Malaysia, and has also served as a visiting research associate at the University of Hong Kong. So today's lecture title, Commentary as a Hermeneutical Aids in Understanding Pali Discourses, promises to offer valuable insight. So please join me in a warm welcoming Venerable Dr. Bhikkhu Gyana Bodhi.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone, venerable members of the Sangha, professors, ladies and gentlemen. I will be talking about the Pali commentarial text as a hermeneutical aid in understanding Pali discourses. As you might know, particularly in the Theravada tradition, Pali texts are very important, and sometimes they are regarded as early teachings of the Buddha, as we have them in terms of like Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka, even though Abhidhamma Pitaka is said to have come later than the earlier two. But when we read the suttas particularly, especially in translation, we find that the message that are conveyed within the suttas are sometimes very difficult to understand. So therefore, with the help of commentarial literature, we can understand them better. So that is something that I'd like to discuss today. As I have mentioned here, exegetical practices have been essential in the propagation of Buddhism since the time of the Buddha. And we may particularly look at this passage here, Buddha's instruction to his first 60 Arahant disciples. You can find this passage in Vinaya Pitaka. Charata bhikkhave charikang bahujana hitaya bahujana sukhaya lokanukampaya attaya hitaya sukhaya Deva Manusana Ma Ekena Dwe Agamitta Deseta Bhikkave Dhammang Adi Kalyanang Madhya Kalyanang Pariyosana Kalyanang Satang Sabhyanjanang Kevala Paripunnang Parisuddhang Brahmacharyang Pakaseta. So here, when in the early time the Buddha started his teaching career, there were just about 60 Arahants. The Buddha gave this instruction to them, saying that go on, venerable monks, to different directions for the benefit and happiness of the people. Teach the Dharma, that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, and that will bring to freedom. So here we already see that, if you just think about it, the Buddha is giving instruction to his first 60 Arahant monks to go to different directions to teach the Dharma. And we can understand that these monks who have realized the truth, just like the Buddha, will be teaching the Dhamma according to their understanding, right? So from this time onward, kind of interpretation of the Buddha's teaching started. And we see in the Pali literature itself, especially in the canonical literature, that the Buddha particularly praised a few disciples who are very well versed, very good in interpreting the teaching. So I mentioned here a few names. For example, Mahakaccana, Sariputta, Punnamantaniputta. So these are some of the disciples, great disciples of the Buddha, who the Buddha appreciated them for their elaboration of the teaching. Like here I mentioned, for their ability to grasp his brief teachings, systematically expound them in detail, understand his intent and correctly interpret the Dharma. Now let's look at how Buddha praised Kaccana, for example. In the Madhupindika Sutta we find that Buddha is talking about Kaccana here. Kaccana the great is wise monk. He is very discerning. Even if you were to ask, were to question me about this matter, monks, I would explain it just as Kaccana the great has explained it. That is its meaning. And you should remember it in this way. Furthermore, in the Anguttara Nikaya we find this statement, Etadaggam bhikkave mama savakanam bhikkhunam sankitena bhasitassa vittarena attam vivajantanam yadidam mahakacchanoti. So this is also about Mahakaccana. So here we find that in the Madhupindika Sutta, when Mahakaccana is giving a teaching to a group of other monks, and those monks approach the Buddha, and the Buddha said that the way Mahakaccana explained the teaching to you, I appreciate it. Even if you were asked the same questions to me, I would explain exactly the same way. And in Anguttara Nikaya, Buddha is particularly mentioning that the brief teaching, as we know, the Buddha Buddha followed different methods of teaching. So sometimes he would give brief teaching, sometimes he would explain the teaching in detail. So here it says that Mahakaccana is the best among his disciples in terms of elaborating a brief teaching. So this is what it says here, Sankitena Bhasitassa, teaching that is explained in brief, Vittarena Attam Vivajantam. He is able to explain them in detail. Then we find here the case of Sariputta. The Buddha is praising Sariputta. This is in the Gopaka Moggallana Sutta. Buddha is saying, for example, that Sadhu Sadhu Sariputta, Sadhuko Twang Sariputta, Imassa Maya Sankitena Bhasitassa Vittarena Attam, Avibhattassa Evam Vittarena Attam Ajananse. So in this case here, Buddha is telling Sariputta that excellent Sariputta, you understand the detailed meaning of this brief statement of mine, which was stated without expounding its meaning in detail. And we can relate to Sariputta's awakening experience as well when he met, Yasa. So that is actually one of the early disciples of the Buddha. Yasa was collecting alms, and Sariputta was just probably an wandering ascetic. And then he was still not familiar with the Buddha's teaching. And when he met Yasa and asked the question, whose teaching are you following? I see that you are walking and talking very nicely with a calm appearance. And then Yasa said a statement that means that I'm a student of the Buddha, and the teaching that he taught me is whatever that has arisen must cease. So this was a very brief statement, and just by listening to that, it says that Sariputta got some kind of awakening, and therefore he was convinced to meet the Buddha. So from this also we can understand that his ability of understanding the brief teaching and able to explain them in detail. The next case is Punnamantaniputta. The Buddha singles out him as the foremost among the bhikkhus who speak on the Dhamma. So this is again in Anguttara Nikaya, Etadaggam bhikkave mama savakanam bhikkhunam Dhamma Katikanam Yadidam Punnamantaniputta, as an interpreter of the teaching. So within the Theravada Buddhist tradition, the Pali discourses and Vinaya are regarded as authoritative sources that encapsulate the earliest teachings of the Buddha. And we find this idea appearing in different texts. Here is a mentioning of that. This is Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Here the Buddha is telling Ananda that Ananda, Yogo Ananda Dhamma Vinayo Maya Desito Panyato Sogo Sattusming Parinipute Acharyo Ananda. Ananda, the Dhamma and Vinaya that I have taught shall be your teacher when I am gone. So what is the function of commentarial literature? The commentarial literature, Atthakatha, composed in subsequent centuries, occupies a vital position as a hermeneutical aid, offering interpretative frameworks through which the canonical text can be understood in their proper doctrinal, linguistic and historical context. Talking about the Atthakatha, the literal meaning of Atthakatha is exposition or exegesis or commentary. They clarify doctrinal topics, words, phrases in suttas by providing etymological exposition, grammar, background stories, and traditional interpretations. Hence, they function as hermeneutical tools in the study of Suttanta teachings. As Robert Thurman defines it, hermeneutics is the philosophical discipline of rational interpretation of a traditional canon of sacred scripture, or more precisely, the science of interpreting sacred doctrine. And Anne Katz similarly describes hermeneutics as the systematic interpretation of text considered sacred by a given tradition. These definitions highlight the reflective and methodological dimensions of interpretation that are necessary when engaging in scriptural text. Now, interpretation of Buddha's teaching may vary significantly depending on the reader's intention, motivation, intellectual disposition, and cultural background. Nevertheless, a hermeneutical approach grounded in the traditional commentaries, particularly those of the Theravada tradition, provides a disciplined and contextually anchored method for understanding the suttas accurately, and that is what we are going to see subsequently when looking at a few selected suttas along with their commentaries. So the aim of this study is to examine how the commentarial corpus function as a hermeneutical instrument in interpreting the Pali discourses. The discussion will be based on selected suttas and their respective commentaries, illustrating how traditional exegesis elucidates and preserves the intended meaning of the Buddha's words. Some remarks regarding the situating the role of commentary as a hermeneutical tool in deciphering the teachings of the Pali discourses. As I was talking about, where can we place commentary, or how can we understand the role of commentary in our understanding of Pali suttas? So this is part of the first passage I mentioned. Desata Bhikkhave Dhammang Adi Kalyanang Majje Kalyanang Pariyusana Kalyanang Sattang Sabhyanjanang Kevala Paripurnang Parisuttam Brahmacharyam Pakaseta. And this is the translation of that. So what is expressed here is that when the Buddha was giving this instruction to the 60 monks, the first important thing is this teaching that he is delivering, and he asked his students to go forth and teach others, is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. So this is something that is beneficial for the people. Therefore, it should be shared as much as possible. In fact, the Buddha said that do not go two persons on the same direction. Go to different directions so that he can cover many people. So, first of all, this teaching is important. And secondly, what comes next is this part here, Sattang Sabhyanjanam, both in meaning and expression. That means it should be expressed correctly. You cannot misinterpret it. You cannot wrongly say it, explain it to people, because then it will not bring good, it will not bring happiness to the people. So therefore, it becomes all the more important to understand properly the teaching. Now, this is a passage that we find in the Anguttara Nikaya, where the Buddha is saying that Dve bhikkave tathagatam abhachikkanti katame dve yocha neyattam suttantang nitatto suttantoti dipeti yocha nitattam suttantang neyatto suttantoti dipeti imeko bhikkave dve tathagatam abhachikkanti. And this is exactly that. The Buddha is telling students that two kinds of people slander or misrepresent the Tathagata. Which two? One who explains a discourse whose meaning needs to be drawn out, nayattam suttantang, as whose meaning has been drawn out, nitatto suttantoti. And one who explains a discourse whose meaning has been drawn out, as whose meaning needs to be drawn out. These monks are the two who slander the Tathagata. So a clear indication of how one should actually understand the teaching and explain it. There's no, place for misinterpretation. Again, we find this is in the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Alaguddapama Sutta. This illustrates the danger of misinterpreting the Buddha Dharma. And you have a simile of a snake, a poisonous snake. So the Buddha is telling in this sutta that the teaching, he's saying, my teaching is like a snake. You cannot hold it by its tail. It will turn around and bite you. And you will be affected by the poison. And the effect of that is that you would feel death-like suffering or you would die. So he's saying that you have to grasp it, hold it by its neck. So that means you have to be very sure in the beginning, at the very beginning, to understand it. What is the intention of your study, teaching, or practice? To end the suffering. So that should be the ultimate objective. And accordingly, sincerely, one should follow that. And furthermore, you find again in the Anguttara Nikaya 4 specific guidelines as to how to regard a certain teaching that accord with the teaching of the Buddha, that represent the authentic teaching of the Buddha. The first is if you hear it directly from the Buddha himself. Okay. Second is when you compare the teaching with Sutta and Vinaya. Sometimes, for example, some teachings appear in a particular Sutta. How do you compare it? You have to cross-check if they appear in other suttas and Vinaya texts, and if possible, the commentary literature. Third is if a group of elders says, the elders have taught us this, he verifies likewise. So this is particularly referring to those elders, those masters and practitioners who have been living the life following the teaching. And finally, if many trained monks recite from memory the Dhamma collections. This is sometimes we see in traditional Buddhist countries, we all memorize some of these texts and recite them together. So they represent the core teaching. Okay, now just a very brief remark regarding the composition and study of commentary literature. As I have provided some indication that from the time of the Buddha, commentarial phase started, because the students started interpreting his teaching and he appreciated that. Right? He appreciated some of his disciples. But traditionally, however, most major commentaries together with the Tipitaka are said to have been compiled in the 3rd century BCE, that is in the time of Emperor Asoka, when he held this 3rd council, when the 3rd council was held under his patronage. And King Asoka's son, Thera Mahinda, brought these teachings to Sri Lanka. So he sent different missionary monks to different places, and Mahinda, along with some other monks, went to Sri Lanka. And since then, in Sri Lanka, you have this Theravada tradition based on this canonical and commentarial literature that Mahinda Thera brought there. The extant Pali commentarial text primarily derived from the recension prepared by Buddhaghosa in the 5th century Common Era. Okay, so even though Mahinda brought this text, they have been transmitted orally, so they have been memorized it and taught them accordingly. But the version, the editions of the text that we have now is said to have been, from Buddhaghosa. He was the one who, edited and rewrote again. Numerous scholars such as Professor Endo, Maria Haim, James Gray, Aruna Gamage have highlighted Buddhaghosa's pivotal role in shaping the Theravada system of thought. Other notable commentators include Dhammapala, Buddhadatta, among others. And talking about the scholars who engaged in the Pali commentarial studies, we find scholars like E.W. Adhikaram, Professor Sodomori, T. Endo, Bhikkhu Bodhi, and others have profoundly advanced Theravada commentarial studies through philological analysis, translations, and doctrinal exegesis. These scholars, alongside Oscar von Hindenburg, Petra Kiefer-Puls, and Rupert Gethin, revived commentarial research via Paritet Society or Journal of Paritet Society, bridging ancient exegesis with contemporary philosophy and meditation practice. Their works affirm commentaries as vital for Theravada orthodoxy beyond the Tipitaka. So here you see the mentioning of these two texts. These belong to extended canonical texts, Nittipakarana and Patakopadesa. They serve as methodological guides for the study of the Tipitaka. So these are the texts understood as guide book to study the Tipitaka. And we see that in the commentarial literature as well, they followed the guidelines from these two texts when they are composing the commentarial text. Okay, now we come to the main part of our discussion, that is, we'll be looking at a few suttas. The first is Rathavinite Sutta. Its commentary is quite long. So I provided you a handout. The first says Rathavinite Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, and you see a brief summary of the sutta. I did not provide here the summary, of course. So particularly in the sutta, what happened is that, okay, I'm going to tell you just briefly, that a group of monks from a certain place called Jati Bhumi. So Jati Bhumi literally means birthplace or homeland. So from Jati Bhumi come to meet the Buddha in Rajagaha. And the Buddha asked them, do you know anyone in your place who is an expert in 10 topics of discussion? So there's a list of 10 topics, and he teaches them to others, and they took the name of Punnamantani Buddha. So Punnamantani Buddha is the one who is their teacher. So the Buddha appreciated Punnamantani Buddha, saying that it is great to have such a learned monk in the Sasana, in the Buddhist dispensation. And when the Buddha was praising these monks for having such a teacher, like Punnamantani Buddha, Venerable Sariputta was present there, and he heard the name of Punnamantani Buddha for the first time. And Sariputta generated a wish to meet Punnamantani Buddha someday. And then we see in the second part of the sutta, the Buddha moves from Rajagaha to Savatthi, where Punnamantani Buddha comes to meet the Buddha there. And then, Punnamantani Buddha and Sariputta had a discussion, a dialogue in Savatthi somewhere on 7 Visuddhi. So I have given you two, list. The 10 topics of discussion and 7 Visuddhi, these are important. So we see the mentioning of these two set of teaching without any detailed explanation. So where can you find the detailed explanation of this? What are the 10 topics of discussion? What are 7 purifications? You just know the names here. Okay, so from this brief summary, we can see that the commentator raises a number of questions. What is Jati Bhumi? What is this birthplace? So normally we are going to understand that since the monks are coming from a certain place called birthplace, probably it is referring to their birthplace. But in the commentary, the Buddha is defining that the birthplace should be it's not a birthplace of those monks or any king or any Brahmins or anyone. It is the birthplace of the Buddha. So they are coming from Kapila Buddha. So it says that in whose birthday 10,000 universes were decorated with a single flag and garlands spread over with perfume of flower, aromatic powder and fragrance. The Nandanavana was shining like one mass of flower and trembled like a water drop on a lotus leaf, and there occurred various miracles. For example, those who are blind from birth saw forms and so on. The birthplace here is said to be the local Jatathana of that omniscient Bodhisattva, a dwelling place in Kapilavatthu in the country of the Sakyas. So this clarification comes from commentary. And then the following question, you have a lot of questions. So the style of commentator is that they raise questions which, as a critical student of Buddhism, when you are reading a sutta, we are supposed to have that. So the commentator had that critical outlook towards this sutta. So they are raising the questions and providing the answer from the traditional perspective. Why was the Buddha concerned about the well-being of the monks, but not about his father and relatives? So it seems that when this group of monks came from Kapilavatthu to meet the Buddha in Rajagaha, it is for the first time the Buddha is meeting people from his birthplace. Since he left as a prince, and then he struggled for 6 years with his ascetic practices and became the Buddha and became a world-renowned teacher, a spiritual teacher. So he did not go back to Kapilavatthu. So this is the first time he met these monks from Kapilavatthu. But he did not ask anything about his father, his relatives. But he asked about the monks, how they came to Rajagaha, did they face any challenge or any difficulties? Okay? And then the commentator, I'm not, I think, going to go through all these questions because I will not have enough time. So, very briefly, the commentator is saying that because of this, that Buddha respects the Dhamma. So, Dhamma Garavata. Buddha has a deep respect for the Dhamma. So, here we find an interesting concept the commentator brought up in the discussion, that the Buddhas have immense respect for the Dharma. And there is a reference to why he have this respect. So it is said here, for example, that here, but why did the Blessed One, without asking about the health of Suddhodana, etc., ask only about such a monk? Because he, here Punna, was dear to him. Indeed, the monks, nuns, male lay devotees, and female lay devotees who have entered the path are dear and pleasant to the Buddhas. Due to their reverence for the Dhamma, indeed the Tathagatas respect the Dhamma. And the nature of their respect for the Dhamma should be understood with the intention arisen in the Buddha at the root of Goatherd's banyan tree, that is, one who is without reverence and who is disobedient lives painfully. So this is a reference to a sutta here, okay, this is Uruvela Sutta, where the Buddha is saying that one should not live without respecting others. In this case, in the case of the Buddha found that it is important to respect the Dharma. And the reason is that he became enlightened following the Dharma, and then after becoming the Buddha, he is teaching the Dharma. So he is living the life of the Dharma, and those who follow the Dharma, he takes care of them. And you have examples of whatever actions the Buddha have done out of his respect for the Dhamma. For example, only due to his reverence for the Dhamma, the Blessed One, on the day of renunciation of the elder Mahakassapa, went along a 3 Gabuta path to meet him. He just came to know that Mahakassapa was renouncing home life in the name of Buddha. The Buddha immediately went to see him. And other examples, like after going on a path of more than 300 yojanas, he established the elder Mahakappina together with his assembly in Arahantship by teaching them Dhamma on the bank of Ganges river. So you have a lot of examples of this. An interesting example is this one I have highlighted here, is the Buddha was leaving Kosala kingdom and he's moving to another place. and Anathapindika was there. So Anathapindika, when he came to know that Buddha was leaving the place, so he was sad. He requested all these settis and a million years and kings, they have requested the Buddha to stay back, but the Buddha said that my work is done in this place, so I should go to another place to help other people. So when Anathapindika went back home, his slave girl, Dasi, saw that Anathapindika was not happy. So the slave girl asked Anathapindika, Master, why do you look sad? So Anathapindika said, the Buddha is leaving, so I will not have opportunity to meet the Buddha. I will not have opportunity to listen to his teaching or to offer him dana. Then this Dasi girl, her name was Punna, she said, okay, let me try. I will go and stop the Buddha from going. Then Anathapindika said, if you are able to do that, then I will release you from your position of being a slave, and I will place you as my daughter. I will consider you as my daughter. Then Punna, when the Buddha was leaving, he's about to leave the city, Punna went in front of the Buddha and then paid homage to the Buddha and requested the Buddha to stay back. And then Buddha obviously knew about Punna, that she is a slave girl of Anathapindika. And so the Buddha told Punna that you are a slave girl of this person, and what can you offer me if I stay back? Why are you requesting me to stay back? So Punna said, Blessed One, you know that I'm a very small person, I'm a slave girl, but if you stay back, probably I will also have an opportunity to listen to your teaching. I will be able to take, 5 precepts or 3 refuges. And then the Buddha decided to stay back, And so Anathapindika released her from the position of a slave girl. And what happened is that she was a very sincere practitioner, and with her serious practice, she became an arahant. So the Buddha, recognizing the spiritual attainment of Punna, said, "Oh Punna, you fulfilled the true Dhamma, just as the moon on its 15th day. With complete wisdom of the truth, you will make an end of suffering." So what we can say here is that you have a sutta, you have some discussion there. Basically, in a sutta, you see 2 things. One is a narrative, a storyline, and another is the teaching. So the storyline of this sutta that we are going through is monks coming from a birthplace to meet the Buddha in Rajagaha. Buddha is inquiring about their teacher and then praising him. And then Buddha moves to Savatthi. And then, in Savatthi there is a incident, there is a meeting between Punna, Mantaniputta and Sariputta takes place, and they discuss 7 periods. 2 sets of teachings are mentioned, 10 topics of discussion. So commentary identify that as Dasakatavattu. Okay, you do not have the term in the sutta, only in the commentary you have that. And 7 purifications, 2 sets of teachings. And at the end of that, there is a mentioning of a particular realization called Anupada Parinibbana. So it's not Parinibbana or Nibbana or Sopadisisa Nibbana or Anupadisisa Nibbana, but Anupada Parinibbana. So kind of a different, terminology, different phrasing of this Nibbana is same. Okay, so then if you look at this question here, why did Sariputta ask questions on the 7 purifications to Punna, even though he knew that Punna was an expert on the 10 subjects of discourse? So this is when we read the sutta, probably we miss, right? As I mentioned, Buddha is asking to the group of monks that who is a person in the birthplace who is an expert in the 10 topics of discussion, and he teaches them others. But when Sariputta meets Punna in Savatthi, they discuss about 7 purifications. So the commentator raises a question that Sariputta should have known that Punna is an expert in 10 topics of discussion. So he should be able to ask him questions about 10 topics of discussion. but why 7 purifications? Then the commentator provides a simple answer here that yang hi visuddhesu sankittam tang katavatusu vittinna, yang katavatusu sankittam tang visuddhesu vittinna. That which is brief in purifications is extended in the subjects of discourse, and that which is brief in the subjects of discourse is extended in purifications. And you have a longer passage of comparing what are the topics of discussion correspond to what purifications, and so on. Okay, so the commentator is saying that they are just two different presentations of the same teaching. And it's actually interesting if you think, I think you are familiar with this text, Visuddhimagga, composed by Acharya Buddhaghosa. You will see that apart from the classification of the teaching in terms of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, they are also presented following these 7 Visuddhi criteria. Okay, so the Sila section covers the Sila Visuddhi, Samadhi, Samadhi Visuddhi, Chitta Visuddhi, and the Panya, wisdom section covers the remaining 5 Visuddhi. Also, what is interesting is that you cannot find the discussion of 7 purifications in anywhere in the canonical text except in this sutta, and here also this, you can see the mentioning of this coming up, in a discussion between Sariputta and Punna. So Buddha is not teaching them. And in the commentary, the Sariputta does not provide, Buddhaghosa does not provide detailed explanation about 7 Visuddhi. What is the reason? He said, Tasang Vittarakata Visuddhimagga Buddha. So I have explained in detail the 7 purifications in the Visuddhimagga, so I am not going to repeat them here. So, So this is how raising the question and providing answer, the commentator deal with all of these topics. How much time do I have?
Yeah.
Okay,
20.
so I'll go very quickly. So as I said, I'm not going to go through all the questions. Just probably one of the talk, I will just show you that Apicca Katha is the first. If you have the list, in the handout. The first one is the talk of few wishes, Apicca Katha. So what do you have here is that a definition of Apicca, one with few wishes. So it says one with few wishes means one who is without wishes, free from wishes, and without craving. Okay, it is like the letters are incomplete, but the meaning is complete. Indeed, there is not even the slightest evil wish within him. One who has destroyed taints is indeed one who has abandoned craving in all respects. This is the definition, and then you see here that you have a detailed explanation, of course. I'm just providing very brief point here that the Buddhaghosa is saying that Apicca can be taken as one of the 4 ichchas. First is excessive wish, Attaricca, evil wish, Papicca, great wish, Mahicca, and last is Apicca. So whereas you have to get rid of the first 3, but you can develop Apicca. So this is the Buddha is praising this, and this is in the tradition, in the Theravada tradition, in the commentary literature. You have all this explanation. Again, you cannot find them in the suttas. And this Apicca can be of 4 types. Few wish for requisites, that is Pachaya Apicca. Few wishes regarding the ascetic practice, Dhutanga Apicca. Few wishes regarding learning, Pariyatya Apicca. Few wishes regarding attainment, Adhigama Apicca. Okay, so this is just the first one. So I'm not going to look at the other ones. I think you can say that. Yes, for example, here it says, this is the case of a monk. I have lived continuously for 60 years in the cemetery, but my companion would not know me as the best cemetery dweller. So this is an example of somebody who has been practicing 60 years in a cemetery, but without promoting it. And there are examples like if somebody does not have Saddha, faith, but he wants people to know that he has Saddha. That's wrong kind of wish. But again, if somebody has Saddha, faith, and he wants people to know that he has faith, that's also wrong. Somebody who has faith, he does not want anyone to know it. So that is the thing that is appreciated. So, and yeah, since I do not have time, I'm not going to look at the other explanation. But this is a little bit about the second sutta, Dvada Vitakka Sutta. You have a summary and so on. So this is where, so you have a few suttas in the canonical text where the Buddha is explaining his own enlightenment experience. He's sharing his own enlightenment experience and his struggle, with the students, with the followers. As this is one of that sutta where the Buddha is saying that at the final stage, before his attainment of awakening, these thoughts arose in his mind. So he categorized them into two divisions, akusala and kusala, and then he removed the akusala and developed the kusala and then went beyond. But what I want to point out here is that generally the way that we understand kusala and akusala is different from how at that point when the Buddha was overcoming these thoughts was different, and the explanation is given in the commentary, just very briefly probably. Yes, so Kama Vitakka, okay, I think without looking at them I can just tell you. The thought of sensuality, in this case, in the case of the Buddha is saying that when he was in meditation and he came out of meditation, he opened his eyes and then he looked around and he saw beautiful nature and then he saw animals wandering and then he had a sense of appreciation. That is regarded as akusala vitakka. So you cannot even have that at that point, okay? So you have to be able to overcome that. You just observe everything without being attached to that or being detached. Going beyond likeness and dislikeness. And similarly, Vyapada Vitakka and Himsa Vitakkas are explained. Okay, when examples are given, like when you think of the bigger animals eating the smaller animals, attacking the smaller animals in the jungle, and thinking about that, your heart is shaken. So, and you see the danger or the fear of animals. So what kind of compassionate thought you have? Do you have compassionate thought only for the weaker animals? And anger or hatred for the bigger animals? So you cannot even have that judgment. Okay, so you have to overcome that because you have to have compassion for all. You are going to see all the same way. So okay, I'm not going to, I do not have time to go through that, but what we have seen is that many of the things are very briefly presented in suttas, and we can only know a greater detail from the commentaries. And it's important, I feel, because the commentary bear the tradition, and from the commentary you can understand how teachings are preserved in the tradition rather than just reading the suttas and interpreting according to how we fit and how we think they fit. Okay? So as a concluding remarks, Dhamma and Vinaya are to be properly understood so that one does not misinterpret and accumulate demerits. Atta and Vyanjana should be made clear. Nitata and Nayata teaching should not be confused. For accurate understanding of the suttas, therefore, commentarial exegesis play an important role. Many suttas present teachings that appear straightforward and sufficiently clear, seemingly not in need of additional clarification from the commentaries. However, in reality, commentarial exegesis is invaluable for elucidating the deeper meaning of the discussions within the suttas. The suttas we have examined for instance, demonstrate how essential the commentaries are for achieving a proper understanding of the teachings in those suttas. Commentarial exegesis embodies the traditional interpretation of the teachings, and as such, it should not be disregarded in the study of the suttas or other canonical texts. The commentaries provide the necessary background to grasp both the theoretical and practical implications of the teachings in the suttas as well as the disciplinary roles in the Vinaya. So we come to know a number of stories of how people have actually practiced and became successful with their practice, and by not following the teaching properly, how they have failed. So this is all for today's discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable Gyanabodhi, for excellent talk. Now, this commentarial tradition, study of commentary is very important when we study the sutra, right? And it's some today when I'm listening to your talk, I remember when I studied a little bit Pali commentary under my teacher Varna Surya, and also when I went to UC Berkeley, and I was lucky to attend one class of Rupert Keating, Pali Text Societies, and we studied Abhidharma Vatara, Buddhadatta. So it's really helpful to study sutra through sutra or commentary, through the commentary work, right? And today you covered so many examples from different sutras and different texts. It's very enlightening. Right? And so now we're gonna open up question, open the floor for a question. If you have any question, please ask. Okay, Brandon.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk about the use of commentary to get the meaning as closely as possible to what the Buddha intended. And do you find any deviation in commentary explanation regarding to the Pali Suttas, the explanation of Paticcasamuppada in terms of past, future, and present? Does that deviate from the early like Pali Suttas teaching? And also like some explanation given for the verses in Jata Sutta, like Anto Jata Bahijata, and the